The chandeliers above the Hawthorne estate shimmered like frozen constellations, casting fractured light across marble floors and silk gowns. Guests flowed through the grand hall like a tide of polished opulence, clinking glasses and murmuring titles, Baroness this, Lord that. The estate's 75th birthday celebration for Reginald Hawthorne had drawn out England's elite, but amid the tailored suits and aristocratic airs, one figure stood uncertain. Eliza Moore held her breath. She stood near the towering doors, a small gift box clutched in her hands, wrapped in careful folds of brown paper, tied with twine. Her black dress was modest, out of place against the tide of sequins and velvet, but she wore it with quiet dignity. Eyes grazed her like frost. A pair of women walked past, voices dipped in mockery. "Who is she?" one whispered, sipping her champagne. "The adopted one, I think," the other replied. "She looks like the help." Eliza heard every word. Her face remained composed, but her fingers tightened slightly around the gift. The whispers didn't surprise her. They never had. She scanned the room, catching sight of Lady Evelyn Hawthorne, her biological mother, across the hall. Cold, elegant, hollow. When Evelyn's eyes met hers, she didn't smile. Instead, she turned to her husband, Sir Douglas, and said flatly, "She's already embarrassing us. I told you she should have stayed in Yorkshire." "She is family," Douglas muttered without conviction, eyes darting toward the guests. "By paperwork, not blood," Evelyn snapped. Eliza looked down at the gift. It had taken her weeks to save for it, something meaningful for the grandfather she barely knew. When she was 19, a DNA test had revealed the truth, a hospital error, a swapped identity, and her rightful place as Reginald Hawthorne's granddaughter. But her return to the family had been anything but welcome. To them, she was a blemish on their polished legacy. She began walking toward the gift table, shoulders straight despite the eyes that followed her like ghosts. From behind a mahogany column, a young banker smirked. "Is she lost or delivering something?" he murmured to his date. A brittle laugh followed. Eliza kept walking. As she passed under the chandelier, a footman glanced at her gift and scoffed quietly. "No name on the tag," he whispered to a colleague. "No place on the guest list either." Still, she pressed forward. She would not turn back, not tonight. The room glittered with crystal and cruelty. Eliza had barely reached the edge of the ballroom when the scent of perfume and judgment hit her like a tide. A string quartet played near the staircase, but their notes were buried beneath polished laughter and veiled insults. Veronica Hawthorne emerged from the crowd like a blade, sharp, poised, and dripping with entitlement. At 26, she was every inch the golden child the estate had chosen, blonde curls pinned high, a satin emerald gown that caught every glimmer of light, and a voice that knew how to cut without raising itself. She approached Eliza slowly, swirling a glass of rose in one hand. "Oh, cousin," she purred. "That's quite the ensemble. Very charity chic." Her gaze dropped to Eliza's plain black dress, then lingered on the twine-wrapped box. "And this? I hope it's not a fruitcake. That would really drive the point home." Eliza met her eyes without blinking. "It's not a fruitcake." Veronica smirked. "Shame." A few guests nearby laughed, nervous, performative. One of them was Nigel Pembroke, a hedge fund heir in a navy velvet tuxedo. He raised his glass toward Eliza with a mocking smile. "I thought you were the new event staff. Then I saw the shoes, definitely not regulation." The group erupted into laughter again, and this time the sound sliced through the music. Lady Evelyn, watching from a distance, offered no intervention. Sir Douglas looked away. Eliza's jaw clenched, but she didn't speak. She simply stood there, gift still in hand, a flicker of something deeper, stronger, burning behind her eyes. Veronica took a step closer. "Honestly, Eliza, you look like you wandered in from the back gate. And don't expect grandfather to remember your name. You were a footnote in a hospital file. Let's not rewrite history." She raised her glass in a mock toast. "To charity cases and clerical errors." And then, with practiced grace, she tipped her rose over the edge of Eliza's box. Oops. The gift box trembled slightly in Eliza's hands, the red wine seeping into the edges of the twine, darkening the paper like a spreading bruise. Around her, the laughter simmered, not loud, but sharp, intentional. The kind that didn't need volume to cut deep. Veronica twirled her glass and stepped back, her job done. "You really ought to be more careful," she said sweetly. "This floor stains easily." Eliza didn't respond. She bent down, slowly, and dabbed the dripping edge of the box with the hem of her sleeve. A foolish gesture, but it gave her a moment, one precious moment, to steady her breathing. Across the room, a maid in a crisp uniform whispered to another server, nodding toward Eliza. "I thought she was kitchen help," she said under her breath. "That's where she came from, isn't it?" Eliza rose. Her dress clung slightly where the wine had splashed. She straightened it without a word and turned to face the crowd still pretending not to watch her. Some had the decency to avert their eyes. Others just smirked behind their glasses. From near the fireplace, Lady Evelyn glided forward like a judge in a courtroom built of pearls and posture. She looked at her daughter, not with concern, but disgust. "If you're going to insist on being here," she said, voice barely above a whisper, "at least try not to look like you crawled in through the servants' entrance." Eliza's lips parted slightly, but Evelyn cut her off. "Don't. You've made enough of a scene. Try to remember what little dignity we've allowed you." A footman standing nearby chuckled softly and gestured toward the side hallway. "Service and trance is that way, Mississippi. In case you need it." Sir Douglas watched from a distance, his glass of scotch suspended midair, frozen in place. He wouldn't intervene. He never did. Then came the last cut. A photographer from a society magazine, camera slung over his shoulder, passed by and glanced at Eliza with a smirk. "Sorry, we're only capturing official guests tonight. Stay clear of the shot." The words stung more than the wine. But Eliza did not flinch. She took a long breath, fixed her gaze on the towering birthday display at the ballroom's center, and walked toward it, not fast, not proud, but steady. She still had a gift to give, and no one would stop her. At the center of the ballroom stood a long, ivory-clothed table stacked with extravagant boxes, each one a display of wealth disguised as generosity. A Faberge egg, a vintage Rolex, a rare Mont Blanc pen in gold filigree. Cameras clicked as Veronica posed beside her gift, a first-edition signed novel bound in crocodile leather. The crowd clapped politely. The game was tradition. Everyone knew how it was played. Eliza stepped forward, stained gift in hand. The hush wasn't total, just enough to let the tension breathe. A few guests exchanged glances. A waiter paused mid-pour. And from the side, Reginald Hawthorne himself looked on with the unblinking calm of a man long accustomed to spectacle. Eliza approached him, shoulders square, her hands slightly trembling as she placed the small box at the far end of the table. "Happy birthday, sir," she said softly. Veronica gave a laugh, sharp and performative. "Oh, how sweet. A soggy little mystery box. What could it be? A candle? A hand-knit scarf? Something rustic from the village market?" Lady Evelyn leaned in. "It's a trinket, no doubt. Probably purchased with a schoolteacher's salary." Sir Douglas said nothing, sipping his scotch like a coward sipping silence. Professor Lionel Merrick, a reserved man with silver hair and spectacles perched precariously on his nose, happened to be standing nearby. Curator of antiquities at the British Museum and a longtime friend of Reginald's, he had seen more than a few relics in his day. Curiosity piqued, he moved closer to the box. Eliza, still standing quietly, stepped back to make space. He lifted the lid, unwrapping the velvet pouch inside. The moment the jade pendant caught the light, his expression changed. "Good heavens," he murmured. Veronica rolled her eyes. "What now, Lionel? Another family heirloom you forgot to catalog?" But the professor didn't laugh. He held the piece delicately, reverently. This is Burmese jade. Mid-18th century. Look here, the consecration mark. This isn't costume jewelry. This was blessed by a Tibetan lama. It's priceless." Gasps rippled through the room. Veronica's smile faltered. Evelyn's brows twitched. Eliza stood silent. No smile, no gloating. Only stillness. The weight of the room shifted, not in noise, but in respect. Suddenly, the girl in the plain dress wasn't invisible anymore. She was irrefutable. The room had barely absorbed the shock of Professor Merrick's declaration when the great oak doors at the end of the hall creaked open. Every head turned. A low murmur rippled through the crowd, the kind reserved for royalty or scandal. In stepped Lucian Thorne, charcoal suit tailored to perfection, black coat trailing like a shadow behind him. At 39, he was one of the UK's youngest billionaires, a former Rhodes Scholar turned global tech magnate. And now indisputably the most powerful man in the room. Behind him, 3 suited bodyguards stood still as statues. He didn't acknowledge the guests. He didn't have to. His eyes scanned the room until they found Eliza. He walked straight toward her, cutting through the glitter and glass like a blade through fog. Silence thickened with each step. Eliza blinked, her mouth parting, uncertain. Then he took her hand and pressed a kiss to it, slow and deliberate. "Apologies," Lucian said, his voice smooth but iron-willed, loud enough for every last guest to hear. "I was delayed meeting with the Treasury Department, but I couldn't miss the birthday of my wife's grandfather." A single sentence detonated in the ballroom. Veronica's emerald gown might as well have vanished. Evelyn's glass trembled slightly in her hand. Sir Douglas suddenly remembered how to blink. Lucian turned to Reginald and nodded respectfully. Mr. Hawthorne, I've just finalized a £1.6 billion investment into Hawthorne Holdings with one condition. He placed his hand gently on Eliza's back. Eliza will oversee the deal. She's outmaneuvered boards that tried to outfox me. She's the sharpest strategist I know. And you, he turned as locking on to Evelyn, you should have seen that before the rest of the world did. The ballroom was frozen. Even the quartet had stopped playing. Lucian's gaze swept across the sea of stunned faces. I understand there were incidents earlier, he added, his tone dipped in ice. Those who mocked her will find future invitations lost. Those who doubted her will find my memory unforgiving. Eliza stood still, but now shoulders straighter, chin lifted. Reginald slowly rose from his seat. The old man, once content to observe, now tapped a spoon to his glass. The chime cut the air like a gavel. I've been silent long enough, he said. Tonight I name Eliza Hawthorne my sole heir. The final word echoed. And the empire trembled. The ballroom erupted not in applause, but in stunned, echoing silence. Reginald's words hung in the air like smoke from a long-dormant fire. Eliza Hawthorne. Sole heir. Veronica swayed slightly as if the floor beneath her emerald heels had shifted. Her grip on her crystal glass tightened until it cracked with a soft snap. Evelyn's mouth opened, then shut again. Whatever rebuttal, she had died quietly, suffocated by the weight of Reginald's decree. Across the room, the masks began to fall. The media, which had barely spared Eliza a glance earlier, now surged forward, their cameras turning like sunflowers toward the true light in the room. Reporters whispered frantically into phones, assistants scribbled headlines on trembling pads. The tables turned. And they turned fast. Lucian stepped forward, eyes locked on Evelyn and Douglas. I hear, he said calmly, you've never acknowledged her. Not once. He slipped a tablet from his coat pocket, swiping it to life. So allow me. On the screen, documents appeared formal, binding, irrevocable. Lucian's voice did not rise. It didn't have to. Thorne Holdings has terminated all future contracts with individuals involved in today's mockery. That includes Vanessa's media appearances, Evelyn's board seat at the Hawthorne Trust, and Douglas's advisory role in our joint ventures. Effective immediately. Douglas paled. Evelyn gripped the back of a chair for balance. Veronica tried to speak, but her voice cracked. You can't do this. Lucian didn't even look at her. You already did. One by one, the guilty were escorted out, Veronica in stunned silence, Evelyn rigid with unspoken rage, Douglas a shadow of a man. Nigel Pembroke tried to slink toward the exit unnoticed, but a staff member handed him a small envelope, no further invitations. The guests who'd once laughed behind manicured hands now bowed their heads, muttering apologies and avoiding Eliza's gaze. But she saw them. All of them. And said nothing. Professor Merrick stepped forward, gently placing the jade pendant back into her hand. A beautiful piece, he murmured. But not nearly as rare as the woman who gave it. Lucian offered his arm. Eliza took it. They stepped away from the ballroom's center toward the terrace doors where spring air spilled in cool and fresh. Behind them, the glittering estate buzzed with a new truth. The lost girl in the black dress had become the woman who redefined the Hawthorne name. Lucian looked down at her, smile soft. Ready to go home? Eliza nodded. I already am. And they walked into the night, leaving behind chandeliers, titles, and all the people who had never truly seen her until now. Weeks passed, but the echo of that night never faded. Eliza's name began to appear in the papers, not as a footnote, not as a mistake, but as a force. Eliza Hawthorne Thorne, from forgotten daughter to financial visionary. Editorials praised her poise under pressure, her unflinching grace in the face of cruelty. But she didn't chase the spotlight. She simply got to work. Under her guidance, the £1.6 billion investment reshaped Hawthorne Holdings. She brought in school teachers for education reform. She backed charities for displaced children. She didn't erase her past, she wielded it like a blade of truth. One evening, a young maid approached her quietly at the estate library where Eliza now held meetings. Mrs. Thorne, the girl said, eyes cast down, I served drinks that night. I laughed with the others. I wanted to say I was wrong. Eliza didn't scold. She didn't shame. She simply looked the girl in the eye and said, thank you. That means something. At that moment, the girl wasn't a servant. She was a person. That was Eliza's power. And though the estate still gleamed with chandeliers and tapestries, something had changed. Not just who inherited it, but what it meant to deserve it. Lucian often said she didn't marry into this legacy. She corrected it. And every time Eliza walked through those doors, head held high, gift box long gone but not forgotten, the walls remembered. Because she had turned a moment of humiliation into a monument of grace. She wasn't just seen now. She was followed. If the story moved you, share it. Let others feel what you felt. And if you believe in stories that challenge the powerful and lift the overlooked, hit that subscribe button. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.